The safety element of having vapes coming into the recycling centre not being disposed of correctly has far-reaching implications. So we're here in the recycling centre on Wrexham Industrial Estate. We've been able to see the plant and the operation and essentially where our refuse vehicles come to offload the waste and the processing facilities that go into what happens to the waste once it arrives. Either if they're the general waste, they'll be unloaded and essentially put to one side to be put through a shredder. That will segregate some of the waste, but ultimately that contamination element means that that waste is non-recyclable. The recycling vehicles come and they get separated onto different lines to ensure that we can obtain as many recycling goods as we can. So we've had quite a lot of issues with fires within the recycling centre. So primarily that is through vapes, lithium batteries and the wrong disposal of them. What we hope is the public are able to see the implications of putting vapes and batteries within the general waste. So what will happen is there's three elements to it: the environmental impact that it has, the safety element of having fires within the recycling centre, and ultimately the cost of that. The operational element has to shut down for 2 hours when there's a fire. The impact on that on the business is great, and ultimately the taxpayer. It also has an implication on insurance and so on. So primarily, obviously, safety is the main concern, but as taxpayers in Wrexham will be aware that they need to ensure that the proper disposal has that impact on them. We'd be encouraging the sellers of the vapes to ensure that they correctly advertise that they are able to take those vapes back. Within the local authority, we're looking at different ways in which we can assist with that, and whether that results ultimately in the curbside collection, we're not at that stage to know, but we are working with partners and Welsh Government in terms of identifying that it is a national issue and what we can do with it locally to assist that. There's always been the odd fire now and again, but primarily the last few months and in particular the last few weeks has seen a spike in that. So there are assessments going on to determine what the cause of that is, whether there's been new vapes introduced to the market or what it may be that's contributing, because ultimately every fire is assessed in terms of anything machinery or operationally that we're doing. And that's not indicated anything different. So there must be something in the last few weeks, last few months, which has caused this increase. What we would do is urge the public to ensure that those who do vape dispose them sensibly and ensure that they're not putting the safety of our operatives at risk through that. There's been a huge investment within the FCC recycling centre. Pretty much the latest technology that is available to identify through thermal imaging, etc., to ensure that we can remove things such as batteries and vapes at an early opportunity, but ultimately the size of the vapes and the batteries are so small, the volume of general waste we're collating means that inevitably that's not going to be 100% effective. So there's as much safety and operational measures in place to reduce that. Ultimately though, the main message is that we can't have these vapes and batteries within that, so we're urging the public to dispose them sensibly. The hose will identify anything through the thermal imaging and put that out, but again, the cost of that is great. The knock-on effect to the insurers in terms of having an increased number of fires here, and ultimately that comes back to the taxpayer, and given the budget situation as it is quite a cause for concern. So nationally there's a return system in place for vapes, so any seller of vapes has an obligation to accept the return of them, so it's their then responsibility to dispose of them in accordance with the regulations. Ultimately that's not happening. I don't think there's enough awareness that that is the case, so the sellers are not making the buyers aware either through signage or that communication. So if they're unable to return them to the shop in which they purchased, they are able to bring them to recycling centres, obviously highlight that with the staff, and they'll be disposed of in accordance with the regulations.